Thank you very much, Catherine. We look forward to seeing that future book. I wanted to note a couple of people that are in attendance today before we introduce our new speaker, or our next speaker. One of which is Mark Vins of Minnesota State University in Moorhead, Minnesota, who for 40 years or so has been writing about regionalism and the Midwest. He has a new article in the journal Studies in Midwestern History about regionalism. I believe it's called Some Thoughts on Regionalism, Writing with a Chip on Your Shoulder, or something to that effect. So please take a look at that. It's available online. I also wanted to recognize Dr. John Miller, who is here today, who has taught at South Dakota State University for 30 years, and he has a very recent book out from University Press of Kansas, the director of which is our next speaker, about people who grew up in the Midwest and how that shaped their identity and what impact that had on their lives. And so please take a look at that. All right, on to our next speaker, Chuck Myers. Chuck Myers is the director of the University Press of Kansas. He took that position in September of 2013. Prior to that, for more than 13 years, he worked at Princeton University Press, where he served as group publisher, social sciences, and executive editor, and acquired and published many, many books on politics, law, and American history. He began his publishing career at the University of Michigan at University of Michigan Press as the editor for political science and law while writing his dissertation. He has a PhD in political science and a law degree from the University of Michigan, and he practiced law in Pittsburgh and Washington, D.C., where he worked in the civil division of the U.S. Department of Justice. Please join us, Chuck.
History to questions of contemporary issues and trends. So, for example, Rebecca Barrett Fox, who is at this conference, has written a book called God Hates, which we're publishing on our spring list, and this is the first in-depth study of the Westboro Baptist Church and the Phelps family. We're publishing books in the fall and future lists on food and drink in the Midwest, which reflect natural trends like the locavore, farm-to-table movement, the resurgence of cocktail culture, craft brewing. So we have a new Kansas cookbook by Frank and Janie Carey, who people here know well, coming out in the fall, and then a year later we'll be publishing a book by Pete Doolin, who's also a well-known character in Kansas City, on a tour of wineries, breweries, and distilleries in Kansas and Missouri. We also are interested in work that complicates older stories and kind of complicates sometimes what history is partially a matter of breaking up myths and retelling stories we thought we knew. So we have actually John Herron here as a co-editor of a collection that is about Kansas City in the 1920s and 30s. We also are publishing work, a book on Kansas baseball by Mark Eberly, who's at Fort Hays State University. I have 2 books under contract for future seasons on Kansas politics. There was a panel yesterday that Burdett Loomis chaired, and included a number of authors who together are co-authoring a book on Kansas politics starting basically in the 60s and moving to contemporary times. And this is a book that will be of interest, I think, both to people in Kansas who are curious about the politics of Kansas, as well as people nationally who are interested in the rise of far-right conservative politics. And I have another book by a British sociologist, actually, Alexander Smith, coming out in a year that is a study of the fate of moderate republicanism in Kansas, and makes a somewhat counterintuitive argument that moderation is actually alive and well here. That will be an interesting book to read. In part, some of the books that I'm looking for and publishing on Kansas politics or Midwestern politics are efforts to complicate and dispel some of the myths about what goes on here. And I think the Midwest is an excellent laboratory for studying American politics and for better understanding what's happening. I'm eager to add books that address issues such as the racial and economic issues in the Midwest, because I think that studying how those issues play out here will tell a story that is of interest to readers across the country. The continuing, the rise in a way of almost a third civil rights revolution, in many ways has started in the Midwest, and so telling the story here will tell us a great deal about where this country is on those issues. Why do we do this? Part of our mission as a scholarly press based in Kansas is to publish excellent work about the state and the region. But we also publish books about the Midwest because important things have happened here that help us to understand not only this region, but also broader social, cultural, political, historic, economic conditions or trends in the country as a whole. In short, we want to publish books from Kansas and the Midwest, not just about the region. The Midwest, however it is defined, offers a rich array of experiences and issues that are important to the country. For example, the challenges facing Midwestern agriculture, mining, and industry are important to the country as a whole and are an essential part of any study of the national economy. The viability of small towns in America cannot be studied without considering the fate of small towns in the Midwest. Similarly, the Midwest is a region of large industrial cities that face the issues common to such cities across the country, such as the decline of heavy industry, the environmental issues, and as well as poverty associated with that decline, unresolved racial issues, as well as actually the revival of some of these cities. I spent a good bit of my life, I have 2 degrees from the University of Michigan, so I spent a good bit of my life outside Detroit in Ann Arbor. And Detroit is although the Detroit is, as the airport will remind you every 15 minutes, in the Eastern time zone, it is in many ways a Midwestern city. And its precipitous decline and the sprouts of revival that are there now tell us a lot about what the fate of cities across the country and the world. I'm not particularly interested in books that complain about the absence of the Midwest from scholarly publishing or from scholarship. Rather, I think that it's important for scholars to define, as the previous speaker said, define what the Midwest is and why studying phenomena that happen here are of interest to a broader public. One of the things that drives book sales for scholarly presses is course adoptions. The book, that a book might be adopted in a course is a staple of virtually every book proposal that I receive. Unfortunately, many of those ideas don't pan out because the books are too specialized or written at too high a level for undergraduate courses. Or the course that it's supposedly designed for doesn't really exist outside one school. Too often authors forget their own practice as teachers in selecting readings when they come to their own work product. But many do get adopted, and those do drive the kinds of sales that keep us going as a business. And to the extent they reflect what is going on in the Midwest, they are attractive to students and expose students to issues in this region. Do courses focused on the Midwest exist? Are the books being published appropriate for those courses? Or do the books deal in interesting and important ways with topics that are taught all over the country? Part of the revival of Midwestern studies might be in the revival of courses on the Midwest. But what is more likely to have a greater impact would be the inclusion of Midwestern history, sociology, political science, economics, etc. in the general courses about some aspects of American life. To conclude, I think the Midwest is a fruitful area of study and of publishing, both in terms of books that appeal to residents who want to know more about the region in which they live, as well as books that use the Midwest to study national questions. One has only to look at the program for this conference as well as the work of the Midwestern History Association, to see the rich scholarly work being done on a range of topics, drawing on the experiences and conditions of the Midwest. So we continue to welcome submissions for books that use the Midwest as a way of understanding important issues, as well as tell us more about the region that we call home. Thank you.